Let me then ask you, picking up from headlines even today, tell us, Dr. Pachauri, does the United States in any shape or form have the ability in any commitments made by India to ensure checks, as has been quoted, on the emission cuts that we have promised?
You know, the language in the agreement is very clear. It talks about consultation and analysis, and it leaves to these countries, the basic countries, that's India, China, Brazil and South Africa, freedom to report, to monitor and to verify its own actions. There is absolutely no imposition on that responsibility which is left with the nations that I've just mentioned.
Reports suggesting that the United States will ensure checks on the efficacy of emission cuts in India are baseless, you're saying? They're not true according to commitments made by India?
Well, I think they're a total misinterpretation, because the interpretation should be purely on the basis of the language, which says consultation and analysis. Consultation does not give anybody the right to override the equality of a dialogue. So it is really nothing more than a dialogue. That's what consultation implies. So I think we are jumping to conclusions in assuming that the US is going to sit on our heads and beat us on our heads if we don't meet our commitments. There is no such possibility. There is no such implication, at least in the language. So I think we are just getting overexcited about this issue.
From what you saw in Copenhagen, in some senses, the collaborative effort between India and China versus the West led by the United States, is the West now irretrievably, in some senses, divided on climate change against the East?
Well, frankly, I think there are lots of divisions. It's not just West versus East. Even among the G77, everyone knows that there is a division. And similarly, in the case of the developed world, there has always been some degree of tension between Europe and North America. And you know, that's going to be there for some time to come, because the whole manner in which these two blocks, these two areas view the problem of climate change is distinctly different. Even if you look at surveys that have been carried out, in the case of Europe, there's a very strong desire on the part of the public to take action, and in fact have governments take even stronger action. Quite the reverse is the case in the US. And I'm afraid this is where the government and the administration in the US should really be doing much more, because we've had 8 years of inaction, 8 years of failure of any policy on the part of the US administration. And I think if we want to fill up that vacuum quickly, any president, any administration would have to carry the people with him. And this is what they should be doing. This is what they should be concentrating on.
Let's come to the Indian government's role at this point then. Did the government seem to you to be confused and dithering, as many experts have pointed out, siding with China finally to form a bloc? Then once we heard the Prime Minister's going, then we heard the Prime Minister's not going. Finally, the Prime Minister went. Then we heard, no one was clear whether the Prime Minister had walked out or not. No one was clear what the Prime Minister, whether he was under the influence of the US or not. The entire mood in the Indian camp seemed to be confused and dithering. Is India getting isolated? Is India dithering? Is India confused?
I don't think so. You see, the whole nature of the negotiations is such. There is no finality, there is no predictability of what's going to happen next. You necessarily have to react to situations. I mean, India has certain principles, as do other developing countries. Those principles shouldn't be abandoned, and I don't think we've done that. At the same time, we must realize we're a large country. The small island states, the African nations look on us very differently from the way they look at themselves. And if we want to carry the rest of the world with us, if India has to be seen and must act like a major global power, we must realize our sense of responsibility without in any way compromising on our principles.
Is there any fear that we are compromising on our principles, Dr.
No,
Pachauri?
I'm afraid not. I don't think so, because after all, we have come up with voluntary targets for reduction in intensity of greenhouse gas emissions. That is an imperative. How can we continue on this path forever? We have to be a sustainable society. today India's course of development is certainly not sustainable. Look at the streets of Delhi, look at the streets of any city, look at the manner in which we manage our water, our air. I mean, these are essential resources that really sustain life, and we have polluted them, we have ruined them to a level that we can't possibly continue with.
Do you believe India's commitments to the efficacy of bringing about emissions for climate change or protecting climate change, will it in any way impede the kind of power generation and infrastructure India needs in the next decade?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, this gives us an opportunity to create new sectors of economic activity. For instance, in the solar energy mission, we have laid a target of 20,000 megawatts over the next 11 years, 12 years. That gives you a unique opportunity to set up a new sector, which would be of benefit not only to India, but also in terms of export opportunities elsewhere. Similarly, if you look at infrastructure, why can't we make our infrastructure green and environmentally friendly? It'll be certainly cost effective. It may cost a little more initially, but look at the huge savings. I mean, an example are these wretched shopping malls that we are setting up.
That's right.
How are they different from what you have in North America? Is this what we should be calling development? Certainly not. We should be constructing them in a manner that reduces our dependence on imported energy, which is growing very rapidly. We should use our ingenuity. My institute has buildings which are energy efficient to the point of really relying on no power from the grid in the case of one major complex. That know-how is available. Why can't we utilize it? So we can get green infrastructure, we can get green power. This is a moment of opportunity that we should seize.
Where do we go next from here, Dr. Pachauri? Some people have said that, you know, in a sense, there was a thaw in ice building up between India and China at this summit. Do you now see that India-China role, as many people have critically pointed out, becoming a sort of, in some senses, of cohesive bloc along with Brazil and the basic nations against the bulwark in some senses of Europe and America? What kind of impetus, what kind of attention would you pay on the India-China role as depicted in some senses in Copenhagen?
Well, I think, let's face it, we shouldn't really jump to any conclusions. This was clearly a limited alliance. That doesn't mean that China and India are going to become
bhai, as they say,
and a set of political partners
right.
in everything. And I don't think we should get carried away with the euphoria of the understanding that we had over there. Even in the field of climate change, let's face it, India and China are in two different leagues.
That's right.
Our emissions per capita are very different. The level of economic growth is distinctly different. They have plenty of coal. We are going to run out of coal. So, you know, we are certainly not in the same league in every respect. But I believe for a variety of other reasons, India and China have to come closer together. How can two giants, which are neighbors, live in a state of tension that we've had in the past? And this applies even more to Pakistan. I'm strongly in favor of creating much better environment in South Asia, because if we were to do that, I think it would diffuse a lot of the efforts that other powers are likely to make to divide us, to take advantage of the divisions that exist. I really think we have to start looking at external relations through a different prism altogether. One single wretched newspaper, the Telegraph, who everybody knows is up to these dirty tricks all the time. They're not going to get away with it, I can assure you.